Much like The Flash, Daredevil is a character who I fell in love with by watching the 2015 Netflix series. Well, I would say that if I didn't own one of the DVDs of the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, which had the episode where Daredevil would make an appearance. That is where I first learned about Daredevil, and while I was a bit too young to read his comics at the time, I was definitely interested to the point where now that I'm older, I can finally enjoy those stories, and he has become one of my favourite superheroes ever. Unlike most of Marvel's most famous superheroes, however, Daredevil had a very rough start that lasted until Frank Miller would start writing for him, and he'd become one of Marvel's greatest characters. However, I would still like to go back and have a look through his first issue, written by Stan Lee, illustrated by Bill Everett, and lettered by Sam Rosen, to see if it still holds up and is a good origin story. I think the story does a good job of introducing Daredevil and his skills at the start, making the reader think he's a regular superhero vigilante with no powers, kinda like what Batman is, who will make a good amount of quips at the expense of his enemies, kinda like Spider-Man does. But we need to get into who Daredevil is behind the mask, so we see his origin story through his father instilling into him to study as hard as possible so that he can amount to something as an adult. While Matt does want to do physical activities, he still wants to honour his father's words, even if it means being picked on by bullies who constantly call him Daredevil. This is a name I personally wouldn't be offended by, even if I know it's supposed to be ironic, but each to their own. But since the fire to do physical activities still boils inside him, he decides to exercise his body to stay in shape privately. It shows how good-natured Matt is, even in his youth. He's still willing to listen to his father's wishes, even if it causes people to pick on him. But Matt still has a passion of his own to train himself and stay in shape. It makes us believe that he would decide to save a blind man from getting run over, even if it costs his eyes getting hit with radioactive waste which blinds him, something that would severely disable almost anyone. Instead, this enhances his 5 other senses to their peaks, so that he's able to tell when danger is near him, who is around him, or where he's even going, without such an important element as sight. When Matt is in college, he is able to breeze through all of his classes, which makes his best friend Foggy Nelson jealous. But with every good thing happening to Matt, tragedy has a way of finding him, as his father is mysteriously killed after winning a boxing match he was supposed to take a dive in, so he finds the burning sensation to bring the murderer to justice. Here, he finally decides that since he might not be able to do that as Matt Murdock due to his promise to his father, he can do so as the crime-fighting vigilante known as Daredevil. Now with the explanations over, Daredevil confronts his father's killers. The Fixer, a shady businessman who was setting his father up for an embarrassing defeat, and hired a man named Slade to kill him once it failed. So while he does fumble throughout the fight, Daredevil is eventually able to outwit Slade and the Fixer, the latter who dies of a heart attack and the former who Daredevil tricks into confessing his crimes to the police. Then, with the day saved, Matt can finally rest easy knowing that he brought his father's killers to justice, all thanks to none other than Daredevil, the man without fear. I'd say battling Jack Murdock is the heart of this story. Like Matt, he didn't want to study at all during his youth, but once he's become a father, he came to realize that he can't rely on his brawn for everything, and wants to raise Matt properly so that he doesn't make the same mistakes that he did. While he isn't happy with his current situation, Jack knows he has to do whatever he can to keep Matt on his studies, even to the point where he ends up taking money from the Fixer, someone he wanted to steer clear for over 10 years. Despite his reservations, Jack is happy about this deal because he can earn enough money just to keep Matt on his educational journey. But once he finds out about Matt's accident, Jack is very upset over his condition and wishes he could have done something to prevent it from happening. While Matt is still growing up into the man Jack always wanted, he's continued the fights going and has been demolishing the competition with ease, even if those fights were still rigged. This time, while Matt has matured into a young adult, Jack is ordered to take a dive in his latest boxing match. However, Matt is in the crowd this time, so Jack instead decides to win the match to show his son that he can be proud of him, even if it is something that costs him his life later on. Sadly, when he least expects it, Jack does get shot in an alleyway, but that doesn't matter to him as he's very happy enough to make his son proud of him in one of the best moments of his life. It shows that when it comes down to it, Jack cares about Matt enough to give him this moment of happiness. The Fixer and his hitman Slade aren't super in-depth characters like Matt and Jack are, but in the context of this story, I don't think they need to be. Their jobs are to be the main antagonists of the story, and they did a pretty good job doing that. The Fixer is a very smart individual who's able to take advantage of Jack's situation by building him up for the crowds, only to try to make him fall in one of his biggest crowds yet. While the plan eventually fails due to Jack's rebellious nature, the Fixer wants him to know he means business when he tells him not to cross him, which leads to him hiring Slade to assassinate him, which goes off without anyone suspecting them. However, Karma is able to catch up with both of the criminals, as Daredevil comes in to take them down, and while they are good at slowing him down, their efforts are rendered meaningless, as the Man Without Fear, along with a fatal heart attack for the Fixer, are able to catch both of them once and for all. Foggy is introduced as the best friend that Matt meets during college, who isn't as popular or as smart as his blind buddy, but still cares for him when his father passes away, and is thankful to have such a great friend in his life. So much to the point where he starts a new law firm with Matt in mind as his partner. He does still get jealous over Matt when he finds out that Karen has feelings for him, since he also likes her, but Foggy still cares enough not to let his law firm represent Jack Murdoch's killer in court. Karen doesn't have a lot to do. She's more or less the typical love interest who is smitten with Matt, but is the object of affection for both of her bosses, which could cause some complications for the three of them down the road. She's not a bad character, just not a particularly great one either, at least for now, since she does however get better in much later stories. Now, I'm not somebody who likes discussing art, but I gotta talk about one elephant in the room, and it's Daredevil's costume. It's not bad, but it's not particularly great either. I don't know, the yellow and red colour scheme looks pretty bleh to me. It looks like he's wearing mustard, and there's only one D on his chest? Yeah, something's not right. But I think a lot of the audience at the time didn't resonate with this look either, as the Marvel editors would quickly catch on and change Daredevil's outfit in the coming issues. In issue 5, Daredevil would add an extra D to the logo, and then in issue 7, Daredevil would go with a fully red costume, and the world of Daredevil readers would be at peace. Too bad they still had to deal with some mid-storylines for the next 15 years. So, I think it's pretty safe to say that this is a pretty decent origin story, all things considered. There are definitely some issues I have, but overall I think Stan Lee did a good job introducing Daredevil, Matt Murdock, and the rest of his supporting cast as interesting characters that the readers would want to continue reading. While the next couple of issues don't hold up as well as this one, and other retellings of this origin story like Daredevil Yellow and Men Without Fear do a much better job with this outline, it's still a pretty solid start in my opinion. It's probably why most of those previously mentioned retellings stick pretty close to what happened in this issue, just adding certain things to make the story feel a little more interesting. So, I think that speaks to how quickly Stan Lee was able to get the character's origin down, even if he and other writers would struggle to keep that momentum going in the next 15 or so years. I really liked making this video as a whole, so I'm hoping to keep talking about Daredevil comics, and just other comics in general going forward. So if you want that as well, I highly recommend subscribing, hitting the notification button, and sharing this video around so that more people can recognize my analytical talents when it comes to comic books. Anyway, I'm Jedi-Liam64, and I think I've taken up enough of your time, so I'll see you all later.